Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich. Today I'm going to be talking about building a city. What is one of the processes, at least, as I've used many, that I use to build a city? Whether the entire campaign or adventure takes place in a city, as might be the case with, say, you're playing in Sharn from Eberron, or something like Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, where the entirety of the world is essentially this giant city. Waterdeep, of course, from Forgotten Realms, right? But maybe you're just building one city among many within your campaign, within your world. And I just like to talk through a little bit of my approach, my process, and it's not necessarily, yes, there's going to be some bullet points here, but I'm not necessarily chunking through this in a 5 bullet point sort of system. But you know that I am very big on approaching my design, the things I create from a Dungeon Master perspective, with a very heavy gameplay first sort of approach, with the thought process of what can my players do with this. I always talk about being very careful between getting into Tolkien, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss mode, Neil Gaiman, where you're creating cool story, cool narrative, and approaching things from a novel writer, creator point of view versus a board gamey point of view. You have to understand that whatever you create, it needs to have bits and pieces that your players can poke and pull and use to foster gameplay, to foster their ideas, okay? So let's just take a look at one step that I may use to build a city. So, right here on screen, building a city, you can use this process to build something smaller as well, a hamlet, a village, a town, by simply removing various bits and pieces, okay? So, here are some city build bullet points with a gameplay first approach, as I just said. I'll go over the 5 bullet points real quick. That's coincidental that there's 5 bullet points. If you've watched any of my 5 bullet point creation system stuff, yes, I feel like my mind is always weaving through that. So oftentimes it's inevitable that that's kind of my little checklist that I go through, but this is purely coincidental. You do not need to stay within the 5 bullet point system here, okay? But here we go. The 5 that I'm going to think through when I'm building a city, and again, applies to hamlets, villages, towns, smaller settlements. Why does the city matter to the PCs? These may not be in particular or specific order, but perhaps that is the most important thing you want to ask. Why does the city matter to the PCs? Again, be very careful with creating the world's greatest city, something that excites you, but there's nothing immediate that the PCs can grab hold of as to why the hell are they there. Because when you start presenting conflicts to them, if the PCs are sort of questioning or up in the air as to why are we here, they're not going to see a lot of value in pursuing that conflict. If it's something that's a little above them, the threat level is too much. There's a guild that doesn't want them in the city. If the PCs don't really have a reason to be in the city, and there's nothing they can grab hold of, guys, we need to be here, so we got to figure this out. When that guild kind of flexes their muscles and attacks outright, right, or puts a hit on someone, the whole group or one of the PCs are just going to say, let's just get the hell out of here. We're not wanted here. Let's move on. We'll come back later. But now they've just sort of thrown your entire city content aside. So always address that initial bullet point. Why does the city matter to the PCs? The next thing you want to cover is the 5 senses. We'll go over those individually in a moment. Problems, okay? And that goes further into 2 other bullet points. And these 2, when you're dealing with problems, really can start to lean into the very first bullet point of why does the city matter to the PCs. So when you're thinking through problems, don't think of these long, overarching, multiple page narratives and political intrigue things if your PCs are all about combat. If they don't have a lot of charisma-based characters, if they're not into the socio-political intrigue of, weaving through that type of stuff, and they don't have rogues that want to dive deep into the black market, and all they want to do is barbarian Hulk smash everything, creating problems, even though that on paper is a legitimate problem that most cities, whether you're looking at ancient history, medieval, modern time, have, you have to create problems that matter to the PCs. So these definitely weave into that very first one of why does the city matter to the group, okay? So when you're dealing with problems, what can the PCs actually fix? That's a really big one because it needs to be within the scope and the skill set, or at least your PCs, or I should say your players, need to be able to wrap their head around the idea that, you know what, we might be able to tackle this. If it's a problem of 5 dragons of Tiamat attacking the city and your group comes into this city at level 2, there's not much there for them. That's not an immediate problem they can fix. So how much worth or how much value is that problem? But that being said, look at the second little sub bullet point. What or where are the potential hiccups for PC progression? Introduce a problem that the PCs can tackle, right? You can always use the tropes, the defaults, the cliches, rats in the cellar. There's an old witch, a hermit that's kind of at the far end of the city, and she's complaining about some ritual. The PCs at low level, level 1, 2, first tier of gameplay can investigate that. But there is nothing wrong with introducing the 5 dragons that are potentially attacking the city, or some lich that's rumored to be the leader of the city. Because what you're creating there is going back to the first bullet point, you're now planting the seed of why this city matters to the PCs later. As they start to investigate your world further and go to other hamlets and villages and towns and cities and nations and whatever, they'll keep coming back to the city and sort of saying, you know what? The main person, not the mannequin, that's the thing at the bottom. The one pulling the strings at the top is in that city. Remember, we investigated that and we learned that there's this lich, or there are these 5 dragons. So it's okay to kind of introduce the Strahd, if you will, at low level. Things that are hiccups for PC progression. Literal hiccups in that, or literal stops to their progression in that there's a threat in this city that might kill the PCs, so they're going to die before they get to the next level. But maybe the PCs need to meet a key NPC, and some powerful force has kidnapped that key NPC. If you've already introduced some lower level problems that can help you chunk through gameplay tonight, it's okay to introduce some of these bigger things. Okay, but that's a way that you can kind of keep that city valuable and important later on. Okay, this is a really good one. You want to think about, what are the secrets of the city? Obviously, in a city, you have massive amounts of people, right? 10, 50, 100,000 population. Some NPC in that city has a secret. And the more sinister, the darker, the more it weaves into potential hiccups for PC progression and so on, the better those secrets are. These are all the behind the scenes notes, but always have some secret to the city. The city is actually over the top of the Underdark. No one really or people know that, but the PCs don't know that ahead of time. The beast sort of circus group, lion taming, the people that bring in elephants and various large animals, they secretly are breeding Tarrasques. I don't know, right? But just have some kind of cool secret. That is the epitome of pulling from and starting to bring in a whole bunch of adventure hooks. Points of interest, right? Secrets. Secret, I mean, if you look at it in real life, there's always something glorious about a member, a group, through their efforts. Through roleplay, as the player's talking to you, through some key dice rolls on investigate, kind of meandering through the streets and getting the down low on what's happening in rumors. There's always something very satisfying and rewarding about, guys, I learned something that not many people know. Remember the Church of Lawful Good Faith? It's currently being corrupted. There's like a demonic possession, you know what I mean? Like those type of things. So come up with secrets for your city. And then finally, of course, you need the details. I did mention in the beginning that there may not be an order other than why does it matter should be first. This perhaps should be last. And I feel like oftentimes when people build a city, if you were world building 101 and you're writing down your world and you have your map, as I'm doing right now in my Silberat and whatnot, and I say, okay, here's the city. Here's the capital city of the Elven Nation and the capital city of the Dwarves. We oftentimes will go through these little bullet points, the demographics, population. What's the dominant race in the city? What's the religion? Why is this city valuable? What are the imports? What are the exports? Religion, leadership. Who's the What faction is the leaders of the city? What's the name of the king, the queen, the lord, the lady? What kind of military do they have? Battle and war. Who are they at war with? Who are they fighting with? Maybe there's some political stuff going on. The king of this city's cousin leads over in the northeast, and that cousin is trying to overthrow the king. So there's some political stuff going on, but they don't want to go to all-out war because it's family. You know what I mean, right? Unique merchants and items. Maybe there's some new magic items you've created. That's the only place in the book where you can get very rare and above magical items from the DMG. Maybe there's a specific merchant. There's sort of the Bill Gates, if you will, like a very wealthy merchant that lives within this city, and he's the one that can acquire anything the PCs might need and may also be able to take things off their hands and has the resources to acquire them. And of course, who are the guilds? Who are the factions? The who's who, the what's what. Name dropping, the important groups, the Harpers, things like that, right? So, yes, you have all those details, but I think as you start to chunk through these details, if you start to plug them and sort of flowchart and take imports, exports, religion, leadership, military, who are they at war with, and start putting them into the five senses, start putting them into the secret, start putting them into why does the city matter to the PCs, you remove, at least up front, all the extraneous stuff, all the bullshit that doesn't really help you get through gameplay. When your PCs walk into that city at level 2, why does the city matter to the PCs and five senses should be paramount. It doesn't matter how many paragraphs you've written on the various religions in the city and leadership. Are they going to meet the king? Are they going to actually see the royal guard? Are they going to go into the noble district and see what the inside of the temple district looks like? Military, battle, and war. Are they fighting for the city? Do they give a damn? You know what I mean? So you can have all these details, but funnel them through the other points first. Let the other points, the why does the city matter, the five senses, inform which details you create initially. You can put, Waterdeep itself, Ravnica, clearly, that's an entire campaign setting based around a single city. Waterdeep can hold and contain all four tiers of gameplay and get you through an entire campaign within that city, as can Sharn and many other places. So there's a lot of depth that you can have. You can create 100 pages on one city. But initially, notice in the parentheses, with a gameplay first approach. Okay? So why does the city matter to the PCs? We talked about that enough already. The five senses, that's always a really big one because that's what grabs hold of your players right now at the table. What do they see? Maybe they see the military and they notice how well, how shined the boots are, how well put together the standing militia is, the guards on the street. Is the police and the guards different than the military? Is the standing army, maybe they're gone. Maybe you notice, what makes one seedy dockside area so different than the noble district? Is it that there is no law to be seen anywhere? Or you can see that it's clear the gangs run this area of the city versus up there in the north or in the noble quadrant, there's patrols of 4 to 6 sort of police everywhere that are a deterrent enough from you doing wrong. Maybe as soon as you walk through the gates, number one, is the city walled? Maybe you walk through the gates and you're given peace ties. Wrap this around your scabbard, your swords. Maybe there's rules on what magic's, anything beyond cantrip level magic is not allowed to be used without going to the Mages Guild and getting sort of a little authority, a piece of paper that you can pull out. If a guardsman or a police force asks you, show me your papers. I saw you casting Firebolt to start whatever. Right? But what do they see? But you can start tying that into the details. How prevalent are the imports and exports? Is that all they see? If this is a fishing city, do they just see barrels of fish everywhere? And notice as you lean into the senses, taste. What kind of food can they eat? Why is that important? If there's spice, that can start to inform that there's so much spice and high levels of flavor to everything. Every meal feels like it's almost aristocratic and wealthy. Spices may be an import-export. Spices may be a big selling point. They may lean into one of the adventure hooks. There's a merchant whose shipment of spices has not come in. When he tells you that's 3,000 gold in spices, that might be a big deal. You know, maybe the PCs start dealing with alchemists and herbalists that can foster something for the druid later on to help them concoct some potions or make some sort of inks and dyes that might be able to be used for tattoo magic. But you're using the senses to kind of prompt gameplay, so that way when the PCs go to the tavern, what do they see? What does the wood look like? Are the floors in good shape? Is it in shambles? So on and so forth. What do they smell? What are the smells? I have a city in my world, Silberat, Barenheim, or Barenheim's the nation, I should say. There's 3-4 main cities in that nation. It's a nation of undead. So you smell death and rot. Immediately, it's repulsive for everyone, but it makes the cleric and paladin say, we need to fix this place. This place smells like ass. And it's just terrible. We need to be out of here. Right? What do they smell? Touch. What do they feel? You know, these are things that really pull against the senses of the real life players, but that's how you draw in the characters. If everything about this city feels slimy and gritty and very Night City, cyberpunk 2077, it's raining, it's always wet, everything feels kind of sloshy and gritty, it's a little bit darker, it makes sense that they may be encountering a vampire guild or a coven or there's 2, 3, 4, 5 thieves guilds within the city, because it just leans into the ability to take advantage of dark vision and hide in the corners and so on, right? But it gives you that certain feeling, but also it gives a sense of reprieve and relief when the PCs finally get out of the rain and the mud-soaked grime and grit and dirt, and they get in and they smell warm bread and it's like a bakery, and all of a sudden that halfling becomes a fun person to be around because they're getting warm clothes and warm food, you know what I mean? So you can definitely create a northern city, Winterfell. It's freezing, and so what are the things they touch? What do they smell? What does the food taste like? What do they obviously see? And then what do they hear? What are the noises? Maybe that goes into, you never really get a long rest here, even in the inns. Even in the taverns. You need to find some underground tavern, cellar, black market complex, because above ground all you hear is shrieking and screaming at night as the rituals begin. But you can now start leaning into secrets, right? What are the noises? So focus on the 5 senses. Really focus on the problems, as I said. Focus on maybe you just need one secret. That's a good starting point. And then hash out the details, but in the beginning, as I mentioned, and I'll say it again because it's important, take all of those demographic things, but start plugging them into, why does the city matter to the PCs? What are the 5 senses? What problems does the city pose directly to the PCs? And what are the secrets? And as you put those demographics, those imports, exports, religion, leadership, military, war, who are they fighting with? Who are the merchants, the guilds, the NPCs? As you start plugging them in, you're starting to create valuable content because they're things that the PCs want to inquire about, learn more about, and delve into. You're not just creating cool stuff that's fun to read when you get to sit back at your couch. Remember, you have a DM screen, music is on, there's dice in front of you. PCs are sitting in, players are sitting in front of their player characters. They're ready for you to tell them roll initiative. They're ready to roll investigate, insight, persuasion, survival, religion, arcana. Give them little chunks, pieces that they can do that with, so they can interact with your city versus you narrating how cool this city is. So there's a lot there, but think of how large a city is, right? Does that mean, when I mentioned earlier that you can use the same process for building something smaller by removing bits and pieces, you need to get rid of those 5 main bullet points in red? No, you don't need to get rid of them, but you can narrow them down. Only have one secret in a village. Don't worry about too many details. Maybe there's only one religion, one shrine in that village you need to worry about. They're not really at war with anyone. It's the city that's at war. But there are some imports, exports. Why is this village important to the region? What does it provide to the city up in the north? Maybe this is where the dwarven mine is. And this is a village that's surrounded that, and they are importing, or exporting, I should say, providing resources for the blacksmiths of the city to outfit their soldiers with metal armor or whatever it may be. So you can just don't think as big picture and don't let your mind get too flighty and creative when you're getting into smaller like a hamlet. If there's only 35 people, you maybe don't even have a guild or an entire faction. You just have some key players. But you also give room for the PCs to form a guild. Things of that nature. Okay? So it's a big long ramble, but hopefully when you build a city, you can think through these things. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for the massive influx of subscribers lately. For the lowly YouTube guy that I am, channel's going really well. Tell your friends, your family, and your loved ones about the greatest D&D channel on the interwebs. All things Lich. I'm Rich the Lich. I'll see you guys later.